Yes! Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Since last time, I've had a mobile tech come down and take a look at this. I'm not the greatest at electrical diagnostic, and I'm pretty sure that this thing is not running due to an electrical gremlin. Some sort of wire crossed, a short, something wired incorrectly. I'm not sure, but we are working on that. The mobile tech did have two suggestions for me to try before we follow up. The first thing is going to be removing the blow-through mass airflow sensor right here. This is right before the intake manifold. The original mass airflow sensor for these cars is actually in front of the throttle plate and would be right around here on the airbox. So, yesterday I picked up a stock intake. I've got it right over here. We've got this 100% stock Legacy GT intake with a paper filter. It still has everything on it. I'm not going to completely install this in the car because my air-to-water intercooler goes where all of this needs to be. So we are going to put it on the end of the throttle body, though, just to see if with the mass airflow sensor in the stock location being a draw-through will make a difference or not. The other thing we found is that when feathering the throttle pedal to keep this thing running at the moment, it's very difficult to do so because the throttle mapping is very aggressive. When this car was an automatic, I mapped the throttle so that once you were at about 30%, you were really at 80. Once you were at 50%, it was pretty much 100% throttle. I set it up that way because as an automatic, the car was a rocket. It shifted aggressively. It was always downshifting exactly when I wanted it to, and the upshifts were extremely firm and crisp. Very good. It was hard to drive this car slow, but man, it was fun. So I am going to go into the tune and make the throttle pedal more linear as a stock one would be, so that 10% is 10% and 100% is 100%. So we're going to give those two things a try, and we're going to see if it runs any better or if it's at least easier to keep it running with my foot. Let's get to work. About to get on it. Please excuse this stupid looking thing on my chest. It's the only way I can get you guys up close shots of the work being done. Step one here, unplug the mass airflow sensor and remove the sensor from the bung. Try not to drop your tools, because that's always fun. See guys, we had a little sealer on there. Ugh. I'm gonna go ahead and get that rid of there. We got this mass airflow sensor cleaned up, pulled the O-ring out of it, got all of the sealer that was in there. And before I throw this in, we're gonna give it a cleaner. This is Mass Airflow Sensor Cleaner by CRC. In there, and then also spray the contacts. Alright, that should be about as clean as she's going to get there. We'll let that dry off on the toolbox here. Next step, I got to get this pipe out, and we've got to make a test pipe for it so that we can put the sensor over here. Because if I leave this right there, we're going to have a really, really big hole. All right, got this in hand, guys. The stuff that's on here right now is actually a Permatex thread sealer. It's pretty much the same thing as plumber's tape, except it's a goo instead of a ribbon. That's probably going to end up being our test pipe right there. Or this one. Or this one. Chain cutter. You can see, guys, we got a nice bead roll on the end here. This is the bead roll I did, which is nothing special, but you can see it is rolled in there, and there is a raised lip here. The other side is a bit more perfect and machined, but I mean, as long as it keeps the pipe on. All right, we've got our piece of pipe, so this mess on the floor here, go away. Label out. Time to reassemble these clamps here. These are the upgraded T-bolt clamps that you want to use when you're running high boost levels, or if you just want to be fancy. If you guys haven't used one of these T-bolt clamps before, compared to the regular worm drives, these are great because, for one, they don't have all the little holes in them, which eventually end up putting holes in your silicone couplers or your rubber couplers, depending on what you're using. These have a nice smooth, and they actually travel on the track of themselves, so they're much less likely to bind up the rubber or the silicone and put a hole in it for you. And you just get a better clamping force. With a worm drive, as soon as you go to, if you get it a little bit too tight, it'll just loosen and then you'll never tighten it again. These, that won't happen. You'll snap the bolt before that happens. So we're going to get these on here ahead of time, because once the pipe is on, it'll be really hard to get it on there. We've now got our test pipe to go in here. All right, guys, as you can see, we've got our test pipe installed here. There used to be a bung for the mass airflow sensor right here, but that was on our old pipe. We've got the new one here. We're gonna get the T-bolt clamps back on. The one thing you do have to be careful with, guys, if you're working with a metal pipe, you're not really gonna have to worry about kinking it. But if you're putting one of these on a plastic intake, like the stock airbox, if you over tighten it, you will crack the airbox. So be careful. That's not something you have to worry about with the worm drive ones. All right, as you guys can see, we've got all our clamps facing about the same direction, give or take a degree or so. Really just helps the engine bay look a lot cleaner when you're done. If you've got one clamp facing this way and the other one facing that way, and one's up and one, it just looks terrible. All right, now it's time to remove this air filter. Actually, I am going to need this piece here on the throttle body, because otherwise I will not have a breather hose on there. The stock intake has this breather hose go on the turbo inlet that would be underneath the manifold right here and come out right where my alternator is, and then come around the corner to the airbox. But since I don't have that anymore, I'm going to have to adapt it with this and use that as my breather hose like I have been. So we are actually just going to remove the air filter itself. All right, so I think that this is going to be our test setup here. We've got the intake here. Normally I would just have a pod filter right where this accordion hose is. That is the stock accordion hose. This is the stock airbox. I've got a brand new paper filter in it. It still has the resonator, silencer, and everything attached to it. This should give me the closest to stock MAF readings possible. So what you are seeing here is just for test purposes. This is just to see if the stock MAF housing and a stock MAF tune will make a difference. We're going to try it with the original tune first, because the stock airbox and an intake is actually very, very close in MAF scaling to an SPT or a Cobb intake. This did originally have a Cobb on it, and there really is not much adjustment in the MAF table that's needed for one of those. So I am just going to continue to use the Cobb MAF scaling that I originally scaled the car to, and we're going to try that with this. It should be so much closer than the very large, I believe this is a 3-inch. It could be a 2 3/4. We're going to find out right now. That is a 3-inch. The stock MAF tube is only a 2.5, I believe. So this is considerably larger. That used to be right here. We are going to come back in a minute here, guys, and we're going to see if this runs on its own. I've got the factory intake on here, as you can see.
It is the ugly plastic, not very well flowing, but maybe it'll help it idle. So we're gonna give that a shot. I'm about to start it up. Yes, it runs. All right, now we got to do a proper break-in on this now that the car runs. The next experiment I want to try is just doing a proper break-in on this, 2 to 3,000 RPM, back and forth. Then, once we've got it with that and I've changed the oil, I'm going to put the larger MAF tube as a draw-through instead of a blow-through to see if that works. If that doesn't work, I'm going to have to get a hold of like a Cobb or an SPT. I really don't need a 3-inch before the throttle body because the throttle body isn't a 3-inch. But I do need at least a 2.5 because that's what the stock piece is. So if I actually if I get a Cobb or an SPT or any 2.5-inch intake pipe for before the throttle body, that should give me the same result as this.